Welcome to WOW, the Woman of the Week podcast. This episode was made possible by a generous sponsorship from the Healthcare Business Women's Association. For more information, visit hbanet.org. In this episode, Taryn Grome, Editor-in-Chief of Pharma Voice magazine, meets with Clare Grace, Ph.D., Chief Patient Officer, Parexel.
Dr. Grace, welcome to the WOW podcast program.
Thank you so much, Taryn. It's wonderful to be here.
Claire, it is so delightful to connect with you again, and congratulations on your new role as the first Chief Patient Officer at Parexel International. What does this role entail for you, and how excited are you to get started?
Thanks, Taryn. I'm incredibly excited to get started. As you know, this is the first CRO to actually position a Chief Patient Officer, and I think it's an amazing step for Parexel to take. I'm thrilled to take that role within the organisation, and I think there's a lot that we can do, both within our organisation and within the industry, to really support having the patient at the centre of clinical trials.
It's awesome. And as the first, you are going to be the center of quite a lot of attention. So what do your first 100 days look like where you're going to be asked to really make a mark?
Absolutely. And there's been a lot of attention, and so many people have reached out to me, Taryn, across the industry. I've had over 500 different contacts to reach out, wish me well, and also to comment on what a fantastic endeavour it is for Parexel to put this role in place. I think the first 100 days really are about understanding the Parexel organisation first and foremost, and all the wonderful things that have been happening there, and really forming a plan as to how we move forward to really ensure that the foundational work that has been completed over the last sort of 2 to 3 years is accelerated and is expanded, and is really everything that Parexel do is centred around the patient, and really putting the patient at the heart of everything that we do. But that's just internally. Of course, externally, there is also a sort of a sense that around sort of spearheading the role within the CRO industry and partnering with my counterparts in pharma to understand, really what is the role of a Chief Patient Officer in the CRO world, because I do believe it is different from that of pharma, and I think it's a slightly different slant to what my pharma colleagues are doing. And so I'm excited, really excited to be able to forge that path for the industry, and hopefully there will be more along the way that join me in doing that.
That's excellent. Now, of course, I'm going to ask you, what are some of those key differences that you see between that role of Chief Patient Officer at a CRO and that at a pharma or biopharma or biotech company for that matter?
Well, I think, Taryn, first of all, for many CROs, not all, but many, it's very much they live in the development world as opposed to the commercial world, and so the interactions with patients are quite different. They're centred around that research base for the vast majority, and then secondly, many pharma companies have very long existing relationships with patient groups and patient advocacy. They're often developing a compound that has a follow-on compound and backup compounds, and they're in an indication or a space for a long period of time, particularly large pharma. And yet, as a CRO, we often partner with those organisations in many different ways. So we could be a strategic partner and a sole service provider, and hence we can work to facilitate those relationships over a long period of time. But for other clients, we may have a very transactional relationship, or for a biotech, it might be almost a one product company. And so if that product doesn't survive through clinical development and launch, that relationship that is developed with patients and patient advocacy and their needs, it's a much shorter time period and much more transactional in nature. And so I think that needs to be transparent to patients, that whilst our pharma partners and biotech are there to develop medicines and service patients in a way that's slightly different to a CRO. We are there to develop medicines, but we don't market those medicines, and we don't maintain that relationship over a much, much longer period as a whole in general. And so I think that's a key difference from our pharma partners, Taryn, that we need to consider as we're working with patients. I think on the other side of that coin, the volume of clinical research that CROs are involved in is huge, much more than any individual pharma. And so I think we have a real opportunity here in terms of the operational aspects of running trials to ensure that we are incorporating and keeping the patient at the heart of everything that we do within the operational aspects of clinical trials as well. So making sure that the protocols service patients well, and that the way that we conduct those protocols, it services patients well as well.
So Claire, it also feels like there's an advantage too from the CRO perspective in terms of the number of different clients that Parexel has the opportunity to partner with or work with. So you're able to really accumulate a lot of different patient stories, if you will, or patient scenarios because of the wide variety of different protocols you might work with and the wide variety of sponsors you might work with.
That's absolutely right, Taryn. And every sponsor brings a different flavour, a slightly different culture that they have, and a different level of desire and ability to interact. You know, some of our sponsors are small, very small biotech who maybe have never worked outside of the US before, for example, and we're able to help them understand the differences of working with patients and servicing patients outside of the US in other countries, you know, other regions like Asia and Europe, amongst others. So absolutely, I think that breadth of experience is incredibly helpful to many of our clients.
Yeah, and I would think too, because finding where those commonalities are would also be helpful. And it might be something that you might see that even your sponsors don't understand, that what they're experiencing on one hand is very common with one of their peer companies, yet they think that they are so unique in that challenge.
You know, that's
An understanding, a greater understanding, I would think, a holistic understanding, if you will.
absolutely. And, you know, if you look at some of the challenges that we're facing at the moment, things like, you know, the rapid transition to decentralized trials, diversity challenges, absolutely, we're seeing different companies implementing strategies and tactics and operations to address those two key areas very differently. And so we're able to understand what works really well, what doesn't. We have a breadth of experience and are able to support clients in choosing what we think are the best solutions, the solutions that really enable us to attract more patients, work with more patients in a way that's easy to do business with the patient, if you like. It's obviously not business to a patient, it's their life and their medical care, but, you know, in a way that is easier and less burdensome to a patient. And then therefore we are able to really support and drive, I think, take a key role in driving some of those new methodologies, new technologies that we're using in decentralized trials, and also just how we manage complex challenges like diversity. You know, how are we ensuring that we are including multiple different groups and mirroring the actual patient population? So yes, we see a wide range of ways to implement and are able to very quickly discern a good way forward for a particular client.
Perfect. I think that it's going to be so interesting to speak to you in a year from now to hear what some of those lessons are, some of those insights that you've gained through the different strategies that you're going to be putting forward over the next, you know, year to 2 years to 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
But I do have to ask, why was the timing right now for Parexel to have you come on board as a chief patient officer?
That's a really good question. And I think Parexel is in a very unique position. Parexel has been in the industry for a very, very long time. You know, they have such respect as an organisation because of the longevity and the experience base that sits within Parexel. And I think in the last 2 years, 3 years, the thing that's really interesting is that the Parexel has really pivoted around innovation and driving forward a culture, particularly of patients being at the heart of everything that they do. And I think those three things coming together, the fact that this organisation has a large global reach with longevity and experience base that is, extensive, coupled with the fact that it really has a very entrepreneurial and innovative spirit and culture within it at the moment, and really wants to drive forward new ways of working. And then the fact that that culture keeps that culture as a patient at the heart of everything, it really does make sense that in a very busy, large, complex environment such as one that Parexel works in, that you have somebody who is able to really lead these activities at a very senior level. If you really want to be a patient-centric and patient-led organisation with all the benefits that that brings, you really need to make sure that you are leading that within and putting the priority on that that's necessary. And I think, Parexel clearly have put this position in place because they believe that, and I believe fundamentally that by creating clinical trials that are easy for patients to participate in, that they are that you can create awareness strategies so patients know those trials are there, and you remove the burden for sites and for patients to participate in those trials, then really you're going to be a lot more successful in delivering those trials. And so I think it's phenomenal that Parexel have taken this step, and I'm really excited and humbled to be selected to lead this way forward for the organisation. But I think it's a great time now for Parexel in their evolution as an organisation to take this step.
I think you're spot on, and I think it really does put that exclamation point on their mission of everything they do is with heart, and everything they're doing is for the patients. And it's now, they're walking the walk and talking the talk. So I think
Indeed.
you're obviously an ideal candidate for this position. You've got tons of experience coming from your previous roles at other CROs, as well as in other drug development positions. What are some of those lessons that you learned that really gave you that confidence to take on this C-suite position?
Oh, that's a great question. Goodness. I think, Taryn, a couple of the key things is really for me is probably collaboration and communication. And that really fits within the organisation externally with patients. It's key. If you're not communicating effectively with patients, and that's a two-way thing, and collaborating with them, you're really not developing a drug for them and with them, and that's the key piece. So for me, that holds true internally as well. As a leader, it's really important that you can stretch across an organization and see the pockets that that can come together and have that vision of taking different elements from an organization and making it more than the sum of its parts. And I think that is really critical for driving forward some of the pieces that we want to here at Parexel. And then also, so collaboration is huge. Being open to that, being open to trying new things, and listening to what people want and need, and then delivering. And the second piece, I would say, is it isn't always about the latest, greatest thing. Often, and more often than not, it's about doing the basics and the fundamentals really well. And I think sometimes we chase after something that's innovative and new, and whilst there's an absolute place for that, and it's one of the things that attracted me to Parexel, there is absolutely a case for doing the fundamental building blocks really, really well. And I'm an advocate for that. And if you have that right and you have that in place, then you have the perfect platform within which to embed your innovation. And so for me, I would say it's that. It's really about being collaborative and communicative, and then really, doing the basics really, really well.
That's excellent. Full transparency, you and I know each other quite a bit, and you were a Pharma Voice 100 honoree a couple of years ago. So obviously, I think you are a superstar, and some of the things that you and I have talked about in the past has really been centered around patients, and you have a really keen understanding of what it means to keep patients at the center. What are some of those residual challenges though that you're still seeing in terms of other organizations that say they want to put patients at the center, but really don't, or really aren't able to. What advice can you provide to some of those companies? What are some of those fundamental, as you just mentioned, first steps that they should take?
That's a great question, Taryn, because that's something that we see a lot in the CRO side of the industry, is that, we have some very large clients, and it is a really hard thing to turn a big ship like that. And many clients will come to us and say, we really want to do this, but it's so hard to implement within our own organization. There are so many competing priorities, and we're so big, and we don't know where to start. So as a CRO and as a service provider, it's our job to be able to offer value and service lines that support their needs. And often it is easier sometimes for those organizations to execute those desires and that wish to be more patient focused and patient led through their CRO partners, and through their service partners. And I understand that, having, worked in large pharma too, there's a lot going on, and it can be very challenging. And so absolutely, our role really is to have very tangible service offerings where we can support that. So, for example, if you take the recent COVID crisis, Parexel very rapidly transitioned over 100 studies from a traditional model to a decentralized model in a rapid period of time, a couple of months, really.
Amazing.
That's an incredible pivot to make. But because we're able to bring together some key pieces, because we, have an understanding of the different technologies and methodologies out there, we were able to go to our clients and say, we think we've looked at your protocols and we think we can do this, 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 and this to transition your trial into a decentralized model. And that has been phenomenally successful. And I think that's what our clients need. They need us to be proactive and to go out to them and say, this is how we think we can help you. Things like, we have a patient advisory council. The information that we can garner from sitting down with our patients is tremendous. And if clients have particular challenges in particular areas, maybe it's a rare disease, for example, huge area of growth at the moment for the industry and a massive area of medical unmet need. And, generally by talking with patients in those areas, you can very quickly and very rapidly understand some of the pieces that you need to put in place to be able to encourage those patients and support those patients in enrolling and staying within clinical trials and retaining them in clinical trials. And so again, those are the sorts of things that we can offer that maybe a small biotech who's only ever worked in the US or in Germany, or even Korea. We have a lot of biotech in activity in Korea. They may not understand the landscape for patients in another country, and so being able to talk to some of our patient advisors in that way and offer that service to our clients, we're really helping them. So there's a lot of things that we can do, assessing the burden of a protocol. That really it's very challenging for a sponsor to do.
Absolutely. You mentioned a couple of times about decentralized clinical trials, and it's obviously the hot topic right now. It's a movement that started maybe a couple of years ago, talking about the hybrid trial. How can we decentralize some of these elements from a clinical trial? What do you see the future of decentralized clinical trials to be?
Well, I think the hybrid trial is definitely here to stay. Let's be clear about that. I think we've made huge progress and had to with the COVID pandemic, and I think that has really helped us as an industry in a couple of ways. It's really helped us with awareness with patients of clinical research. I get my friends calling me now saying, do you think that vaccine has been properly developed and do you think it's safe? I don't think I've ever had one of my friends ask if any drugs that they take or medicines or therapies have been effectively tested and are they safe before. That's a new one that's very welcome, I have to say. But so awareness now is at an all-time high, I think, in all honesty. And that's key in transitioning to hybrid studies because patients need to be aware to be able to access them, and for them also, I think, really to ask their physicians, is this something I can do, but also to do some of the steps a little bit differently, because a patient going for a blood draw at a local pharmacy is very different to going in to seeing their physician for that, and doing their diaries at home, which is a lot more intense really, and having virtual visits and Skype calls, and it's Microsoft Teams a lot of the time now as well, and the different platforms. I think just having that awareness and that those other issues of not wanting to access sites at the moment has really helped us to drive that forward. So I don't think this will revert backwards. I think the key thing for us moving forward with virtual and hybrid studies and decentralized studies is ensuring that we keep the good, and we remove the things that didn't work quite so well. There will be a bit of a shakedown, I think, that will be needed to really effectively drive them forward, but I think the time is ripe for the industry to come together and really put some framework around hybrid and decentralization of trials, because I think it's really critical that we are able to move forward in a collaborative way and in a way that is orchestrated effectively for the industry as a whole.
I was going to say, I couldn't agree with you more about the collaboration around all of this, because it's going to take a collaborative effort to make sure that everybody's working in the same direction. The last thing you want, or we would want as an industry, is to lose the opportunity and the advantages of this time.
Absolutely. We need to capitalize on that, and we need to drive that forward, and to do that in a way that is collaborative across the industry, that is streamlined and within a framework that the industry as a whole can work behind, I think will be absolutely key to ensuring that we are able to maximize the number of studies that are able to run on a hybrid platform, and then maximize the amount of opportunities that we have to create less burden for patients and more access to clinical trials.
I love that point, that it's the lessening the burden on the patient and increasing the availability of the clinical trials, because that's really what this is all should be about. So I love those thoughts. Talk to me a little bit about how you're building out your team. This is a new position, and you're having to do it during a global pandemic. So tell me a little bit about that process for you.
Sure. It's new to us all, working in a global pandemic, but and I've worked remotely or home-based for a very, very long time. So for me, being at home is no different to really in a pandemic, really, to being at home normally, except that it's you can't actually meet with your team periodically. But I think the key thing about building a team, particularly here at Parexel, is making sure that we have the right elements brought together to really move things forward around things like decentralized trials, diversity, rare disease, those sorts of things. In terms of building the team, I'd say that team and structure are two very different things, and I'd rather talk about team than structure. The structure is neither here nor there, really, in all honesty. It can be one of multiple. However, the team itself, I think, is really critical in the elements of the team. So I think it's really important that you have team that share the mission, first of all, that are flexible and forward thinking, but also that are prepared to really dig in, because one of the biggest things is when you're driving change and you're driving innovation, it's really ensuring that that change and innovation embeds properly and is retained within the organization and reinforced. And I think those are the sorts of pieces that really make the difference as to whether an organization is able to capitalize on change and innovation or not. And so it's really important that we have the business processes in place, that my team and the wider team at Parexel are ensuring that the steps that they are working on, whether that be developing a protocol and making sure that patient groups have reviewed it, or whether that be a new technology and making sure that we've had patients in on UAT, or whether that be working with sites to make sure that we've got the right materials to attract patients that would be centered around that particular clinical setting. It's really important that at every single stage of our process, that where we need patient input, we are gaining it. And so it's more about having a team that are able to put that in place, but also that the wider team are able to access that, work through that, and deliver upon that framework, really.
Thank you so much for clarifying the difference between a structure and the team in terms of the people themselves and what you're looking for in terms of those team members. Because you're right, the structure can be here or there and everybody's virtual at this point. So that's really not the concern. It's about bringing in the right people to help you fulfill on your mission. And how would you describe yourself as a leader? Those who might want to join your team.
That's really interesting. I think what I strive to be is authentic, to be honest. We're all working through a pandemic at the moment, where some of us are homeschooling. I am indeed, and I think, to be authentic and honest and open is really, really critical, to really support your team. And the reason I think that's important is because we're all striving for the same thing, and we will achieve it far faster if we have an open, honest environment where people can be authentic and honest, and that, where we have challenges, we learn from those. Where something didn't go quite as we intended it to, we learn from it. And so for me, it's really important to have an environment that people feel safe, that they know that they can trust their leadership, and that leadership can trust them. It's a two-way thing. So for me, that's a really big piece, is just that authenticity and trust, and then honesty and openness that goes with that, and collaboration. I am one mind, and everyone knows that the best thoughts and ideas and delivery and transition of thoughts and ideas into action really come from a team. There's no I in team, as many people say. So really, it's about making sure that I'm collaborating effectively across my organisation, but also within the industry, across our industry. I think that's a really critical part of my role. And bringing back those learnings into our organisation so that we can create better solutions for our patients and our sponsors.
Lovely. As a role model and as the first Chief Patient Officer of a CRO, what advice do you have for other women who may want to take that leap into the C-suite? What are some of the lessons you learned along the way that positioned you for this role?
Oh, wow, that's a really good question. I think stay true to your passion in life. I think when your passion aligns with the objectives and the direction of an organisation, is when you're really able to do your best work and excel. That having a desire to, and always being focused on patients and unmet medical need and quality of life, but being able to position that into an environment that is equally moving in that same direction and wants to, I think is a huge piece. So I would say, understand what your passion is, follow your passion, and with that you will find your tribe, you will find your organisation and your team that really have that same passion in life. And then the other thing I would say, and I say this to my team all the time, is, dream big, because you never know what you can achieve. My father used to say to me, you can achieve anything in life if you work hard enough, and I absolutely agree with that. Nothing is unachievable in life. There's always a way, and so dream big, because you just need to find the way to make it happen.
Love that. And finally, we ask this of all of our WOW podcast interviewees. Please tell me about an accomplishment or a pivotal moment in your career, that wow moment that helped shape or transform your career. And I know you could probably tell me a dozen of them, but I'm going to push you to kind of think about one.
Okay, I think the biggest one was actually very early on in my career. I was a CRA, in oncology. My background is in molecular oncology, and I remember going into a site and reading the notes of a patient that was a subject on the study, and her life just lifted off the page, and it was one of those moments in time where I just thought, wow, this is an individual, this is a person, this could be me, this could be a friend, and everything that they were dealing with, and yet they were taking time out to do research to drive forward a solution. And I felt very inspired by that individual, whose name, I knew from the notes obviously, but was a number in a trial effectively. And that was one of the things that really made me think, I want to be in this space, I want to do more, I want to create cures, I want to create a better quality of life for people. So I would say that was a really key defining moment in my career, actually, in driving me actually to this role of Chief Patient Officer.
It's amazing that, one study protocol, reading one study protocol has led you through your career. I think that's an amazing wow moment. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. It's, sometimes it's not those big, huge moments. Sometimes it's those quiet moments that really have the biggest impact.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much. Clare, I can't tell you what a delight it's been to speak with you, and I wish you so much success in this new role. I know you're going to knock it out of the park, and Parexel is so lucky to have you sitting in this Chief Patient Officer role. And I can't wait to see you again in person so that we can properly celebrate this tremendous accomplishment.
Thank you so much, Taryn, and it has been wonderful chatting with you. I've enjoyed every minute of it, and I can't wait to see you again.
Thank you for listening to this episode of WOW, the Woman of the Week podcast. And thanks to HBA for making this episode possible. For more information, visit hbanet.org. And don't forget to check out our other WOW episodes at pharmavoice.com/wow. This 2021 program is copyrighted by PharmaLinks, LLC.